Okay, I just wanted to do just a quick word about investments, because if you've got a self-managed super fund, you must have a written investment strategy. It says that in the SIS legislation. And Section 52 of the SIS legislation actually sets out very clearly what has to be included in that written investment strategy. So we have to, in the written investment strategy, we have to talk about the risks involved of making the sorts of investments that you want to make, what the likely returns might be on those investments, what is the long-term objective of your fund. So is it, your objective could be that I want to get a return of 8% per annum over the long term, or it could be to say, my objective is to make sure that by the time I'm 60 I have enough capital in here to pay me a retirement income of $70,000 per year, for example. So you have to have an objective. You also have to talk about what the expected cash flow requirements are within the fund. We need to also cover whether or not the fund is diversified or not. Now, your fund doesn't have to be diversified. You could have 100% of it in BHP if you wanted to, or 100% of it in a term deposit. But if that's the case, you have to give commentary as to what are the risks involved with you not being diversified. We also, again, so cash flow is really important. The tax office thinks a lot about that because it mentions cash flow, liquidity and meeting your liabilities 3 different times under the Act. So we also have to look at the liquidity needs of the fund and the ability of the fund to discharge its current and prospective liabilities. So if you're in the accumulation phase, your liabilities will be tax and fees every year. If you're in pension phase, it'll be well, won't be tax, but it might be fees, and it'll be the pension payment. So you have to have given consideration to how will this all work. So for example, if you've only got a property in the fund at retirement and your tenant moves out, how do you pay the pension payments in retirement? I'd also just like to talk about how you can protect your capital in a self-managed fund, because I think, as I said at the start, super is a tax structure, not an investment, but a lot of people still think of it as an investment. So I just wanted to touch on this for a minute. And I've got someone here that, and this is, these unit prices are real unit prices of an Australian managed share fund that we use for some clients. So on the 1st of August 2008, the share price was 82 cents. And this particular client just invested $75,000 in a lump sum on the 1st of August. Now, at that stage, they thought the GFC was over, but of course it had further to fall after that. And by the time we got down here to March 2009, the unit price had dropped to only 51 cents. So by that stage, this person's feeling pretty sick because their 75,000 is now only worth about 46,000. So thinking about, should I cash it in? Now, that would have been the worst possible thing to do, to cash it in. So they've thankfully stayed in there, and by 1st of October 2009, the unit price has gone back to 87 cents, so we're back over where we started from. Now, what we would have done with this same sort of client is said, look, don't put your money in all in one lump sum, and I still am doing that now, whether or not the market's going strongly or not. We would have suggested that if you came in with $75,000 to invest, that you average into the market over a 12 to 15 month period. So in this case, the client was contributing $5,000 a month, every month for 15 months. Started off initially, they only purchased 6,124 units, but by the time it got down here to March 2009, they actually were purchasing 9,895 units. So instead of feeling sick at that point, these clients are delighted because they're just getting more units for their $5,000 each month, so they're pretty happy with that. Now, by 1st of October 2009, our first person had their 75,000 has recovered and it's now worth 80,000, so they're quite happy with that. But our second client, who's put the $5,000 in every month, they've still contributed 75,000, but their portfolio is now worth 97,000, just purely because they were buying more units as the market was dropping. Okay, and some of you are doing this by default because your employer's putting the 9% in every month, and that's had the same effect. So dollar cost averaging really protects people who are in the accumulation phase from suffering losses, and in fact builds your portfolio. Also wanted to talk about protection for retirees, because I'm sure a lot of you have heard about people who were about to retire or had already retired, and then the GFC hit and they've then lost 30 to 50% of their capital. That usually happens for one reason, and that's because they've had their entire superannuation in a balanced fund or a growth fund, and all of their pension has been getting drawn out of that balanced fund. So in this case, they had $1 million invested, and it's been paying $65,000 a year. Now, if you think about that previous example where the unit price is dropping, these people are doing a reverse dollar cost averaging, and every time they pay their pension payments out, they're selling units at worse and worse prices. So they are, in effect, eating their capital, and that sort of thing, when that happens, is very, very difficult to recover from, possibly impossible to recover from. Now, if with all of our clients, we have it set up a little bit differently. So if this client had had $1 million invested, we would still have it invested in overall a balanced manner. But we always make sure that we have at least 3 to 5 years worth of retirement income sat over here in our cash box. Okay? So in that case, that's about 5 years worth of income. And in the lead up to 2007, when the market was running strongly, we had our clients overweight in cash at that point. We've then got the rest divided up between some property and some international managed funds and some direct Australian shares. So overall, it's still balanced. But importantly, our pension is only being drawn out of our cash box. So when the market started to correct, we can actually just ignore what's happening over here in these two boxes, because we know we've got 3 to 5 years before we need to start drawing on them. So the market usually takes about 2 years to recover from a correction. This one's taking a little longer, but it still will be recovered by the time we've used all these funds in 5 years' time. Now, in a good year, if we've got profits, we would be taking the profits from over this side and topping up our cash accounts on the other side. So undertaking that strategy, most of our retiree portfolios, where they were drawing an income, only had about 10 to 15% capital losses during the worst part of the GFC. And those portfolios are already recovered back to square, and in a lot of cases, because we had cash sitting here, we were able to then go and buy back some more shares while they were cheap. So we've really protected the value of their portfolios. Okay, so that's basically everything I wanted to go through tonight, but I think overall we've covered a fair bit of ground. We've had a look at how to pay no capital gains tax, and that is just simply by timing it correctly so that you don't sell assets that will have capital gains, whether they're shares or property, until you're actually in that 0% pension phase of your fund. We've looked at why borrowing inside super makes sense, and I think for anyone under the age of 50, it does make a lot of sense if you can structure it correctly. We've looked at how to maximise contributions while minimising excess contributions tax, and I think you could see you really don't want to get hit with those excess contributions tax, and sadly it's usually a bit of a shock to people because the notices are being sent out a couple of years after the year that you made the contribution. We've also looked at how to minimise estate tax, and again, it's important that if you're holding all your assets inside super that you've taken that into consideration. Now, some people say to me, I couldn't care less what tax my kids pay, I'm not going to be here, and if that's how you think, there's no issues with that. But a lot of times people say to me, look, I've paid a lot of tax over my lifetime, I really want to try and minimise it for the next generation. And if that's the case, we need to look at that early and make sure we're putting strategies in place. And lastly, we looked at segregation of assets and how that can make sense from a risk profile point of view, an estate point of view, but also importantly from a tax point of view. And I think that you've been able to see that with all the case studies that we've looked at, that it is all about providing you with strategic solutions, and that's really how we can make a big difference to the value of your retirement capital over time.